The May 18th, 2024 meeting of the Hayden Planning and Zoning Commission is now called to order.
All right, Commissioner Erickson,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Bemis,
Here.
Commissioner Gibson, Vice Chair Howard,
Here.
Commissioner Prickett, and Chair Taylor.
Here. We're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any conflicts of interest this evening?
Nope.
No. First item is the approval of the consent calendar, approval of Planning and Zoning Commission meeting minutes from May 6, 2024. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns about the minutes?
No.
No.
No. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from May 6th,
I second that.
2024, as presented.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes, carry it.
And
So
we'll,
we'll,
okay, perfect.
we'll move on to unfinished business, which I believe is 3A, select date for the Planning and Zoning Commission Town Hall meeting.
So the gist is the way that we presented it, we'd have like 2 weeks ahead of the meeting, so we'd have stuff on the website, those 2 weeks kind of leading up. We'd have the open house town hall meeting, and then we'd have 2 weeks after. So I'm trying to find this kind of spread that I can make work in everybody's calendar schedule. And May is gone at this point. So that's sliding me into June. I'd really like to have it like the second week of June, if we can find a date that works. Otherwise, the last 2 weeks of June don't work because I'm on vacation one of those weeks, and Lisa's on vacation the other one of those weeks, so doesn't really work. So that pushes us into July, and then we have we're working around budget workshops as well. So I'm just trying to find a date that kind of works for everybody, and if we can find one with at least 5 of you here, then that would be awesome. So if we look at the calendar, today, we have a council meeting on the 11th, and thank you, everybody. We were able to get a quorum to move our June 3rd meeting to June 10th. That was a noticing hiccup on my end. I'll take full responsibility. I lost a week in May somewhere. So I'd be looking for like the 12th or the 13th for an open house town hall. I know the 13th is probably difficult for part of the commission. So I was kind of looking at the 12th, but I know that Wednesdays are hard for part of the rest of the commission, so.
Did you say Wednesday the 12th or Thursday the 13th?
I was kind of looking at those two.
Yep.
Otherwise, we'll have to shift it and potentially go into July.
Either work for me, or either.
I could do Thursday the 13th.
I can do Thursday the 13th.
Can't do Thursday.
Okay. Mary can't do Thursday.
I might be out of town that whole week, but
Okay,
it's not
so-
confirmed, so I'm a maybe.
We're okay to move it to July. I just need to kind of know what we're doing, because if we move it to July in the first part of July, then I have to prep the public notices before I leave in June. So we just need to find a day that works.
When are you gone?
I'm gone the 18th through the 24th of June.
Give
I'm
up my golf on
going to send a
Thursdays.
quick text and see if there's any possibility that I could do that Thursday.
Okay.
Okay?
I'll give up my golf that Thursday if you,
If not, we could push it back out to like the week of the 8th is terrible in July.
and you're back on the 19th, it's just that Wednesday, the next Wednesday, is that right? Or
Yeah.
24th.
Yeah. Or you're gone then, that's right. So it's-
I'm gone from the 18th through the 24th,
Okay.
so
So then next would be Wednesday, June 26th.
Sixth.
I can't do that Thursday.
Or you can't do the 13th?
I can do the 13th, I can't do the 27th.
Okay, I'm pushing send. We'll see if she responds to me quickly.
Okay.
I'm trying. It's a hard and fast for me, but
Right.
if I'm really the only one that can't, I will see if there's any possibility.
Well, David, I think, is gone all week, so
Well, the
you're not the only
Well, the
person.
13th might be the best because every other week, there's, I'm
Right,
gone
that's where
those
we're,
weeks as well.
yeah, I totally get that. Okay.
And do
we're-
we need all of us here for those, or is that?
Well, the goal was to have 2 planning and zoning commissioners at each of 3 stations and
So
one
6.
as kind of a float to kind
Yeah.
of fill in. That was kind of the goal.
Okay.
And then we'd have 1 note taker at each station,
Mm-hmm.
so that you guys are totally just about answering questions, kind of conversation.
Okay.
And then we'll have people in the room as well, so. Okay, so while you're waiting for an answer, we're gonna shoot for our first choice as being the 13th.
Okay.
Does that work? Yeah,
And
okay,
if not, then it's probably gonna push to July, right?
yeah.
Okay. Should we start on the workshop then while
Thursday,
we're waiting to
June
to hear?
13th.
Oh, yeah, because she could take, I might
All
have
right,
to just.
so
Okay.
we're gonna wander into this workshop question. So, all year long, I put on my board all of the kinds of quirky things like scriveners and errors, like the code points you to this section, but it really should have pointed you to one section sooner. Or topics that come up that people go, maybe we should look at that and see if it makes sense to put new code in that isn't there. And so this is one of those, and before staff spends a ton of time on this new code section that we don't have at the moment, I wanted to bring it forward to the planning and zoning and kind of get direction. And if you say, yeah, you want to add code, then staff will spend time trying to figure out how to bring code forward, okay? So, we're not talking about any specific projects with this particular code. It's important to note that. But it was a topic that has come up a couple of times. And that is the term, wetlands or preservation of those areas. And in the last year or so, the last couple of years, there's been some changes in the federal standards as far as what dictates a wetland and what doesn't. So other entities have added language to their code sections that didn't have them previously. So we're just gonna kind of give you a really 5,000-foot level kind of overview of wetlands.
Wasn't some of that based off that case in Priest Lake?
It is absolutely based on that
Yeah.
case in Priest Lake. And lots of concern from lots of very conservative folks about that. My water bottle. In fact, that was well talked about all over the place out there.
What happened?
And I, in no way, shape, or form, am a wetland person, so.
It was a wetland that was later actually defined. That it was a case that went to the Supreme Court that put a definition around wetlands.
So that one wasn't considered a very hard wetland, if that makes sense, and.
It's a long story.
Got it. Okay.
So again,
And a
we're
long
not
case.
talking about specifics.
Yeah, and a long case history, but I can
Got it.
see about it.
So the Idaho Conservation League identifies that in Idaho, wetlands are the homes of many valuable fisheries and endangered species. Many of these wildlife species bring economic benefits to communities, and according to the Idaho Fish and Game, nearly 50% of the bird species in Idaho rely on wetland and riparian habitats. And I'm actually gonna send you this PowerPoint after this workshop, because most of these that are in a blue, not all, but most, we decided that it worked better this way, right? Have links.
Okay.
And so you can actually go out and look at the whole article that I kind of summarized in little bullet points, okay? think about it, and then at a future workshop or what have you, we'll bring it forward again, but if you guys decide that you don't want us to look at wetland code, we won't. And if you do, we will.
Can I ask, is a riparian habitat, is it important that that's, I don't know what that is.
Right, and it'll define that in more depth and detail.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So the Boise Urban Almanac says that as a desert state, the vast majority of Idaho's wetlands fall along the boundaries of rivers and lakes, and they change seasonally. But according to Idaho Fish and Game, Idaho's low acreage of wetlands makes them that much more important. For example, half of our bird species rely on wetland habitats, and half of our rare and at-risk plants and animals rely on them as well. And because our fresh water is so limited, over 75% of all animals rely on wetlands at some stage in their life. I was at the GIS conference trying to figure out who hosted the wetland database. And I said, everything kind of points back to the USGS. And they said the USGS actually pulls their data from Fish and Game, so the National Fish and Game. So Idaho's Fish and Game is the set for the state of Idaho, which I thought was interesting. The EPA definition from the Environmental Protection Agency, they state that wetlands are areas where water covers the soil or is present either at or near the surface of the soil all year or for varying periods of time during the year, including during the growing season. When you look for a wetland, you're looking for a jurisdictional delineation under the Clean Water Act in Section 404. And the jurisdictional delineations are performed on a property in order to delineate which waters are waters of the U.S. and are therefore subject to this Clean Water Act, Section 404. And that preliminary jurisdictional delineation is submitted to the Army Corps of Engineers by whoever's looking for the permit, the applicant, and then the Corps verifies. No other entity verifies the jurisdictional wetlands except the Army Corps of Engineers. Then the applicant can decide whether they would like a final approved delineation or would like to proceed with an application with only a verified preliminary delineation. So then the Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, that was a program that was established to regulate the discharge of dredged and fill materials into waters of the U.S., including wetlands. Activities in waters of the United States regulated under this program include fill for development, water resource projects such as dams and levees, infrastructure development such as highways and airports, and mining projects. Section 404 requires a permit before you dredge or fill material may be discharged into the waters of the United States, unless the activity is exempted from the Section 404 regulations, like farming and forestry can be, and not in all cases. So the basic premise of the program is that no discharge of dredged or fill material may be permitted if, one, a practicable alternative exists and is less damaging, or two, the nation's waters would be significantly degraded. In other words, when you apply for a permit, you must first show that the steps have been taken to avoid impacting the wetlands, streams, and other aquatic resources, or that potential impacts have been minimized and that compensation will be provided for all remaining unavoidable impacts. So then who enforces wetland requirements? So the Army Corps of Engineers defines the type of wetland. Is it jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional? The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, they enforce that 404 permit for the Clean Water Act. The Idaho Department of Environmental Quality reviews the work in, around a jurisdictional wetland area and determines if it's met the 401 permit or the 401 certification process. The certification process is what the state requires to enforce the Section 404 requirement. Idaho Department of Water Resources reviews the wetland area in conformance with areas identified at the national and state level and whether or not a required buffer or mitigation area for those disturbance activities is required. Idaho Fish and Game identifies the wetland assessment areas versus the riparian areas versus the disturbed areas. And the USGS provides the wetland maps used by the EPA and the other national agencies. Got all that? So let's look at maps. So I just kind of took a blip of Hayden down here in Hayden Lake and pulled all of the areas that show up as wetlands. So there's no other areas of the city of Hayden that shows up as wetlands on any of the sites. Now, that's wetlands. That doesn't determine whether or not they're jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional. It just defines them as a wetland map. Okay? So the National Wetlands Inventory is this map, and the it's a viewer that's put out by the EPA out of Ohio, which I thought was weird. It's exactly the same map, different aerial imagery behind it, exactly the same view of the maps and the water areas. And then
So at some point, we're gonna define what a wetland is?
it's already defined. In like,
Will it be in that link?
it will be.
Okay.
Yep. Wetlands from Idaho Fish and Game, you get kind of a pixelated view of all of the areas that are either disturbed wetlands, completely disturbed wetlands, lightly disturbed wetlands. It's very pixelated kind of object. And then they have about 200 wetlands in the state of Idaho that Idaho Fish and Game are watching, that are areas of priority. So for the wetland conservation component of the Idaho Department of Park and Rec State Comprehensive Outdoor Recreation and Tourism Plan, the Idaho Conservation Data Center developed a prioritized list of wetland sites in need of acquisition for long-term conservation and management. The Idaho Wetland Conservation Prioritization Plan considered three broad types of criteria. One of them was, what kind of a wetland was this? The second one was, how does it function and what's its value? And the third one is, what are its threats and impairments? And for each site, a variety of data was analyzed using GIS to evaluate those criteria and rank the sites, and the top 20 wetland sites are summarized in this report if you click that link. And I can tell you that none of them are here. Ta-da! None of them are here. Of the 20 sites that the state prioritized as wetlands that they absolutely wanted to keep.
Yeah, that image back a little ways, the real pixelated one, that was our area specifically, wasn't it?
It was,
Okay.
yeah. This is the Idaho Flood Hazard Map. So this is FEMA's National Flood Hazard Map of the area. And as you can see, none of the area in the city shows up as being in a flood zone. So none of those wetland areas are considered to be flood risk in the FEMA's flood hazard layers. So then we went through and did kind of a comparison to other jurisdictions' wetland codes. So the city of Sandpoint has a definition that talks about those areas that are inundated or saturated by surface or groundwater. Talks about the duration of how long that lasts for. Do they have circumstances that support a prevalence of vegetation that typically adapt for life in saturated soil conditions? And they're typically look like swamps, marshes, bogs in similar areas. And they have an extension of water service into wetlands, which they prohibit, absolutely don't allow for. And then they have limitations where water service can be extended to within 5 meters of a wetland. And those wetlands are described by the Soil Conservation Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, or the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And then they have a water line distribution along 2 of the roads that are adopted by ordinance. Keep in mind that those all have to do with water line extensions, and the city of Hayden isn't a water purveyor. The city of Bayview and Kootenai County, and they have a wetlands definition. It's very similar. It's talking about having a prevalence of vegetation adapted for life in a saturated soil condition pretty much year round, related to those swamps, marshes, bogs, and similar areas. A jurisdictional wetland is a wetland which the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has determined is part of the waters of the United States for purposes of federal jurisdiction and regulation. That's what Bayview and Kootenai County have. They also identify when a water specialist would have to be brought in to talk about the wetlands and to create a wetland determination. Experience in wetland delineation should include delineation of wetlands using state and or federal regulatory manuals, preparing wetland delineation reports as outlined by the state or federal regulations, and conducting wetland function and value assessments and developing and implementing mitigation plans. They identify most of their wetlands in their PUD requirements. And so basically, if the National Wetlands Inventory Map shows it as a wetland on site, or if a soil survey indicates the presence of hydric soils, or if the director or design professional determines there may be wetlands on site, then a detailed wetland analysis and delineation would be required. In the city of Hauser, wetlands are considered a sensitive area per the Hauser City Code. And then they also go back to the federal, state and federal wetlands protection standards and meeting the 404 where it applies. Demonstrate compliance with this performance standard and complete the application and permit process as a condition of compliance with the title. And they go back to lakeshore and stream corridors, including the 100-year floodplain, and you can see that we don't have a flood map anywhere in the city, so it's hard, that would be difficult. I take that back. We do have floodplain analysis right down on Honeysuckle Beach, so where you face that lake, right there, those 5 or 6 lots, they are within the flood zone, but there isn't anywhere else that has a flood map associated to it. So entities with no wetland codes or are mentioned in other codes, the city of Coeur d'Alene has no codes. The city of Post Falls mentions just that one little liner in their stormwater management. That's where they address wetlands. The city of Spirit Lake is also mentioned in their stormwater in one little blurb of wetland. The city of Rathdrum, I asked Shannon to do some more research because we hadn't found them originally. And so it pops up in their preliminary plat standards and site plan review standards. Again, it's just one word, all kind of mixed into the rest of the surface water bodies or slopes conversation versus a whole paragraph or pages. And so what we're trying to figure out from a staff perspective is if you want us to add wetlands into our already existing stormwater code, similar to what other jurisdictions have done. Do you want us to write a more robust, a couple of paragraphs that would land in subdivision and or site plan standards? Just trying to look for direction. So I'm gonna go back to this map.
Didn't you say currently the city of Hayden has no wetlands in it?
I said that we didn't have, yes. So we have had wetlands that are in developed areas currently, and we have no other wetlands inside the city limits. We do have one wetland area in our area of city impact that kind of comes along this path along Strayhorn. That does have a blip on the radar where that's a seasonal kind of stream area. But other than that, and down here, should this property ever decide to annex, again, it was annexed and de-annexed, there would be a little blurb down there as well. But other than that, there isn't anything. So I mean, the question from staff arises, could this not be addressed in meeting the conditions of whatever we decide for this wetland at the time of annexation and included in an annexation agreement? Or do you want code that identifies it? I don't care either way, I just kind of need direction from the Planning and Zoning Commission is what you want me to do.
Well, we could do it like Rathdrum or Post Falls, couldn't we?
You mentioned it in your stormwater management section.
But I want to email this to you guys. You guys can mull it all over, click all the links, do all the research. If you feel different, then, you know, we'll do whatever it is you tell us to do. Yeah, that's the sentence.
Do we know of any of those areas periodically being changed, how they're viewed or zoned?
I asked when I was at my GIS conference, because the GISers make the maps, you know, and they said basically that they're on an update cycle and they update them every, whatever that update cycle is, and Fish and Game is actually who does those updates, and then they get pushed through the channel.
Can you go to the next slide? I think it's the pixelated one. Okay, I guess.
So this
follow-up
is
question.
Lancaster.
Yeah, I see that English point right there. I guess the follow-up question would be, with this kind of information, could this potentially play a role in a definition being changed in the future?
I don't know.
Okay.
Do you have anything to add? No, okay. And keep in mind, these pixels are talking about how these wetlands have been disturbed. So all of these are areas that had some wetland functionality but have been disturbed over time. So they may not even exist anymore today.
So
Or they could, I just don't know.
so we don't have any ground or areas that meet the definition of wetlands. But does that mean that we don't have any areas that get seasonally marshy or anything like that?
Not that any map that's out there shows.
Okay.
I mean, the closest I've ever seen to that would be down in the county area down here, down in this neck of the woods, and it shows it as being seasonally marshy. So
Right. So what is the ramification of, I mean, each of these, several of the cities in our area have put mention or put codes in and that kind of stuff. But some of those just in, 10,000 foot view, look like they've just put it in there and basically said, we're gonna let it be up to the state and feds, whether, what we do or don't do. But they really it didn't look like they really did anything that would actually impact any.
The issue is most of your cities, especially around here, don't have any staff that specialize in wetlands that could even work on a wetlands delineation. So Sandpoint, for instance, has code that's been updated because they have some identified wetlands that are jurisdictional where development has come forth, and then they have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers to get a 404 fill permit if they're going to be able to develop on or around those wetlands. And it's the Army Corps of Engineers that determines that it's their jurisdiction. Wetlands are not a city jurisdiction is the issue. And so the 404 fill permit will say, this is what you need to do to mitigate any damage or potential damage from your development so that you can build here. Does that answer your question? So the cities
It
have put,
answers a different question I had in my mind, yes.
so the cities have put in code out of an abundance of caution, but they really don't have a jurisdictional basis to do anything in relationship to the wetlands because the jurisdiction lies with the state and the feds.
So what is the risk to the city if it's such a balance because we're very much about that person who owns that property has a right to change their lives by selling it.
Sure.
But there's also a responsibility that if an area is seasonally wet, marshy, that kind of stuff, to the untrained person, they see the ducks seasonally every year they're there. There's some responsibility to say, gosh, maybe we shouldn't develop there.
Only within your jurisdictional authority.
Right, so my question, I guess, is it a risk to even put language in?
No, it's not a risk to add a definition or add process language in there. It's just important to recognize what authority local municipal government has and what it doesn't.
Right, and I recognize that we don't have anyone on staff that would have any idea how to measure that, judge that.
And I think Donna's giving you just a beautiful overview of the difficulty in even using the word wetland. What is it? What is it not? What is your responsibility if it actually is identified as a wetland in the development process, and where are we obligated to make sure that the developer has brought forth the experts necessary that then we can evaluate with our own expert? I mean, I think you should just let her finish. You'll get some more of your
Okay.
questions answered,
I'm
but
so sorry.
No, I think I was pretty much done, actually. So I want to send this to you guys. I want you guys to do your due process. We'll bring it up on a future. I really tried to go out and pull just about everything that you'd need to evaluate it, figure out, kind of a direction. But I think Fonda said it very well. And I think that also, there are a variety of levels of agencies and jurisdictions that review this. And so, I think our process would be to push them out to those agencies and follow through accordingly based on whether or not they become back as jurisdictional or not.
Donna, in light of all the research you've done, looking at the different cities in the area, I tend to agree with Joel that maybe following how Hauser does it, where it's a very simple addition of that wording, might be the best route because of the lack of wetlands in our city. But are there pitfalls to doing that with what's going on with adjacent cities and their problems, or is that a good way to go about it?
I think that we could do it either way. I think that we don't really have a lake shore or a stream at the moment, so I don't know that that would fit at all, but we could address it so that it was similar to this. Bring that back if that's what the planning and zoning would like to do.
Well, I look forward to looking through everything that you put together for us so that we can make it intelligent.
Okay, so we'll probably put it on a follow-up meeting in June, and just get a kind of feel. We have a couple of other code sections we're kind of trying to massage that we'll workshop probably in mid-June as well. We have to get some other feedback before we bring it before you guys. But I didn't want to spend a ton of time on this if you guys had, didn't want us to go down a rabbit hole. All right? But I didn't want to miss it either because it had been brought up.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah, thank you.
that's my workshop. Have you heard back?
That's it?
Oh,
That's the
all
whole
you got?
workshop.
wow.
6 o'clock.
Great job, Donna. Thank you for all your hard work.
So Miss Mary, have you heard back?
on the 13th.
I just heard back from Keith Gibson and he can do the 13th.
Okay.
Still waiting on Ben Priggett.
You are busy.
Nice.
I'll say yes and I'll
Okay,
see what I can do.
all right. So we're gonna shoot for the 13th,
I already put it on my calendar.
the open house in the town hall.
What time on the 13th if we are doing it on the 13th?
If we have no conflicts with anybody else, we'll do it from 4 to 7. If we have conflicts with other meetings, which I don't think we will, we'll do it from 5 to 8.
5 to 8?
So right now, we're gonna call it 4 to 7.
Okay, 4 to 7 right now.
So what are you expecting for, like, what's our gameplay for this thing? Are we gonna be sitting in one spot with a whole bunch of people crowded around and we're all gonna be talking about a
Kind of
topic?
as a general format, we're gonna open with a video
Here, in this room?
here in this room. And we'll have it set up in kind of 3 stations, with the goals and policies up on boards. And you'll be standing next to the goals and policies. And folks will be able to come up and talk to you and ask questions.
Okay. So we're basically gonna be presenting to people the subject on our
The
board.
opening is gonna be presenting, and then you're gonna be there just to kind of answer questions from the public.
Okay.
And we're gonna have note takers, so you'll just get to focus on who's there. We're gonna have, kind of stuff out on tables, so people can write down their comments, write on sheets of, additional goals or additional policies or crossing out things or whatever.
We're
They'll
just gonna
out
be in
there as
here.
well, and we'll only be in here, yeah.
Are you gonna put us in teams and then,
Should we do it?
you'll send us an email saying, hey, Joel, you're talking about this?
Well, I'll put you in teams, we'll talk about that.
Okay,
Yep,
thank you.
yep, yep.
Did we say there's a meeting on the 10th?
There is one on the 10th and one on the 17th.
So that'll be good, because that meeting on the 10th would be a good time for everybody to find out who their partner is and
Yep,
what they'll be covering.
yep. Yep, yep.
Okay.
And we do have a public hearing on the 10th, so, and maybe a couple on the 17th, we'll see. Trying to get their i's dotted and their t's crossed.
5:30 for the meeting times on the 10th and 17th?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Any more reports for us, or?
Well, I think that's it. The CanCore zone map amendment that went to city council was approved at their last council meeting, so the written decision and ordinance will go forward at the next meeting. That was all.
That is it?
Okay. You're teasing us with these short meetings, aren't you?
Well, yeah, because
it's
they're not gonna last forever,
Put your
so.
seatbelt on.
That's what makes me fearful.
Yeah, they're not
Put
gonna
your
last
seatbelt
forever.
on.
Yep.
Okay.
That it? All right, we are adjourned.
All right.